We had a nice double. I think I came away with a good 80 plus pointer. So, yeah, I'm on a pretty hot streak in terms of green arrows. So, looking forward to adding to that and climbing further up the table.
Yes, well, welcome everybody. This is Game Week 26. So, obviously, everybody on Instagram knows what's going on because Ben has done a lovely introduction as usual. But I'm obviously here on YouTube as well. Andreas says, "You legend, welcome back. It's great to be back. We were back last week, but you know we're getting into the full swing of things right now." But yeah, Game Week 26, as you said, Ben, a lot of people need to look out because obviously there's some blanks, but there's a lot of injury news as well. We're going to be talking Kevin De Bruyne a little bit later. That's one of the biggest news coming from this game week. But yeah, we're going through everything alphabetically, so just remember that. Make sure to time your questions appropriately. So we'll be going through Bournemouth all the way to Wolves. And just as usual, I say, do check out the Premier Injuries website. So we try and answer as many questions as possible in these live streams, but we can't always do it, or sometimes there's some breaking news that maybe we're not aware of and it happens after. So you can check out premierinjuries.com. We've got the legendary injury table there, also Ben's Twitter or my Twitter, and we will try and answer you as quickly as possible. But as always, we're going to start off with AFC Bournemouth. And what is the latest for the Cherries, Ben?
Tell you what, before going into the team news, Jason, I just want to, in case anybody's just joining the stream, cut up a little bit late. You'll be looking after the questions coming in from YouTube. I'll keep an eye on Instagram. We'll go through alphabetical order. Any of those questions that pop up, we'll do our best to answer those. But before going to Bournemouth, we are joined, esteemed company, by another McKenna in the house. Do you have any idea who that could possibly be, Jason?
I did see it. It was my Uncle Paul. So big wave to him joining in for us. Maybe he's seeing how I'm doing in terms of presenting, following in his footsteps.
Yeah, I think he's checking out you, Jason. Or, he's checking out the jacket. It could always be the case.
Yes, I mean, that's a very good jacket this week. I've just got my usual polo on, trying to look smart as possible. He'd always be saying, am I disgracing the family name? But I think I'm doing a good job at the moment. But yeah, any other things on Instagram that we need to be aware of before we go into our Q&A?
No, just a few shout outs. We have Newcastle future star in Megson, number 7. I've seen this guy, number 11. Congratulations to him. Played in 2 tournaments for the under 11 academy side this week. One of those being down at St. George's, the England training camp last weekend. They won that tournament. Actually, they beat the Gunners in the final 3-2, Jason. You'll be saddened to hear. And they also went down to Leicester, I think it was on Tuesday, and won a tournament down there. So big shout out to Megson. And also a shout out to my son, the real Ralphster. He's just joined. He's in the house as well. So yeah, look, it's jam-packed across here on Instagram. But to the matter in hand, Jason, let's kick off. You asked for team news from Bournemouth, and we have heard from Andoni Areola ahead of their game last weekend, and he referenced the fact that the Cherries probably put their best performance of the season at St James's Park last weekend. Of course, they came away with a share of the spoils. Newcastle a little bit fortunate with a late Matt Ritchie goal to equalise. In terms of availability, the squad is more or less the same as last weekend. Roman Fall has recovered from illness. Otherwise, it's pretty much as you were with those long-term injuries.
Yes, and it's an interesting one for I guess, the lay Premier League fan, because they've never ever won a game, the Cherries, against Manchester City in all of their 13 Premier League games. So I don't think much is going to change this weekend, but we shall see. They've played well throughout the season, Bournemouth, and I guess this is probably the best team that they've had in the Premier League for a long while. But let's continue over to Arsenal. Very disappointing midweek result. I watched it. One of the most boring games I've ever seen. I don't know what happened with the team. In the Premier League, they've been lightning. They've been scoring loads of goals. They've been fantastic in front of goal. And then this week, what happened? They couldn't find the back of the net. Really struggled against Porto, who did a very good mid-block against us. But what is the injury news for the team? Is there any going to be boosts or any negatives coming into game week 26?
Yeah, as expected, really, Mikel Arteta keeps his cards very close to his chest, very coy on team news ahead of the McKenna Dinnery derby this weekend. I don't, or should I say, I didn't hold much hope of maybe picking up a result down at the Emirates, apart from, after that result midweek. And I think it will be a really sort of true test of the title credentials of Arsenal to see how they bounce back from that. Of course, league form, 21 goals in 5 games. They've been outstanding. The Gunners were unchanged for that trip out to Portugal. So that maybe throws into doubt, whether Mikel Arteta wants to freshen his team, certainly in terms of players who could potentially return to that starting lineup. Gabriel Jesus is said to be very close, but he has been managing that knee problem for a while. He's the only one realistically. Thomas Partey has been training with the group, but he's been out for such a long period. I suggest the best we can hope for with regards to him is maybe to be named among the substitutes. Excuse me.
Yeah, you need a little bit of water there, Ben. um, yeah, well, with the Gabriel Jesus situation, midweek we could have probably done with something like him. What do you think with the kind of scenario with Arsenal then? Are they going to risk him for this game? Or do you think that the strength of the squad out there this weekend means that they don't really need to kind of worry about, I guess, testing him because it's all that injury management with him?
Yeah, I would suggest that Mikel Arteta can afford to take a more conservative approach to his reintegration into the team. I'm a little bit disappointed or surprised maybe that Mikel Arteta doesn't utilise more of his squad in terms of substitutions. Eddie Nketiah was a player who maybe you would have seen primed from the bench midweek, so he's waiting in the wings. Whether he doesn't quite trust him enough or believe in him enough remains to be seen. Like I say, if you purely just scratch that from midweek and you look at that league performance, then I don't see any reason as to why Arsenal should make any changes. It would purely be just a case of managing the players' workload ahead, of that game. The fact that it's being played at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night allows that additional recovery time, and that certainly will help. So yeah, I've got a feeling Arsenal may be unchanged for the third time in a week. Concerns, I don't think we've scored down at the Emirates maybe in the last 8 games. And I think that last time we did score, we lost 4-1. So listen, if we could leave there with a point, then I would snap your hand off right now.
Wow. And just an interesting fact, going back to 2018, it's always been one or the other team has scored. So it's never been both teams to score in this Arsenal-Newcastle matchup. Now, another Jason B on YouTube has asked, will Tomiyasu be available? So what's the latest with him? The latest I heard is that he's still a little bit off, probably a little bit later than Zinchenko as well.
Yeah, nailed that, Jason. Exactly what you said. Returned from the Asian Cup with a slight niggle. We know he's had ongoing cough issues, which have caused problems, throughout his time at the club. This is the latest in a long line of minor setbacks. We're looking at Partey and Gabriel Jesus potentially this weekend. Zinchenko maybe game week 27, possibly 28, but there's no guarantee with that. And then maybe Tomiyasu a little bit after that. So fingers crossed before the international break. But like I say, Zinchenko and Tomiyasu are the two big concerns with regards to, their availability because of their history with recurring and ongoing muscle problems.
So let's bring it to Aston Villa. Big kind of injury concerns for them. Defence has been decimated and the huge loss of Kamara. But is there any positive news going into game week 26?
Certainly no positive news in terms of actual players returning to the squad. Positive news in respect of players are progressing. I'm thinking about Ezri Konsa is probably the closest of those. Diego Carlos still working by himself. And we already know from conversations with Unai Emery last week that we won't see Tyrone Mings again this season. Certainly on the pitch, hopefully back training with the squad. So we expect more or less the same Aston Villa squad this weekend. Not too much change, of course. They come off the back of that win, and Ollie Watkins seem to be back in the groove. So again, it wouldn't surprise me if the villains were unchanged this time around.
Yeah, and a good result last week for them. They don't really need to tweak too much. It's probably going to be a test over the few weeks ahead, though, to see how they manage with that new makeshift back line and midfield as well. Brentford are up next. So what's the latest with the Bees?
Yeah, it's pretty much as you were. Of course, the Bees faced Manchester City midweek on Tuesday night. Unfortunate, played really well. Unfortunate to lose by a single goal in that game. That's right, isn't it, Jason? It was a single goal. Was it 1-0? Hopefully, I got that right.
Yeah, against City.
Yeah. I thought I had imagined that for a second. But yeah, so it remains to be seen again if Thomas Frank wants to freshen his starting 11 up. In terms of his defence, there was a surprise a couple of weeks back with Ethan Pinnock setback. That's probably going to keep him out an ankle injury until after the international break, which is why we see Christoph Ayer in there. The two wing backs now look to be locked in Sergio Reguilon on loan from Tottenham and Roslev on the opposite flank. The other discussion points could be around maybe Johan Wissa. The Bees made three changes at the Etihad. Johan Wissa was one of those players coming in. Damsgaard is another option available to Thomas Frank. But reverting back to the starting 11 that we've seen in game week for the first game of game week 25.
Now the Seagulls are up next, and there's a few little injury updates for them. What is De Zerbi kind of told us for the weekend ahead?
Yeah, so this the big news coming out of the Seagulls camp is the potential loss of Karim Mentoma, and that's to a back problem. Now, asked specifically, did this relate to that tackle, the horror tackle from Mason Holgate that resulted in a straight red card? It didn't. He actually went into that game last weekend carrying a slight problem, so it's just carried over from that. And when De Zerbi sort of hinted or suggested that maybe Mitoma would not be ready. Now, again, that throws a little bit of a few question marks with regards to his team. Ordinarily, in what we've seen in the past, we've seen João Pedro take that place on the left-hand side of the attack. But obviously, Pedro is going to be out now, probably until after the international break. We've heard from the new Brazilian coach who's ruled out the likes of Alisson, Matthias Cunha, and João Pedro out of those upcoming internationals. I think England being one of those. However, De Zerbi a little bit more coy. He said somewhere in the region of maybe 2, 3, or 4 weeks. That left-hand side to me, that potentially then opens the door for Esputinen. And if he does come in, it could mean a slightly more advanced attacking role with a slightly tweaked formation. I don't really see how we could maybe shoehorn other players in there. Buonanotte is somebody that has drifted out to the left-hand side on occasions, but predominantly you're looking centrally or on the right-hand side. And Adingra more definitely favours that right-hand side flank.
Now, there was a question on Instagram, Ben, but Slavcho has sent us a lovely message as always. He's one of the kind of mainstays in our chat. He said, "Hello guys, great to see you 2 weeks in a row. Yes, we're back in full form now. So yeah, you'll see us through the rest of the season." But what was that good question? I think it was about Crystal Palace, Ben.
It was, yes. And obviously, if we'll touch upon the Crystal Palace news as we come up, just for those if you've missed it at the head of the live stream, we'll go through those on an alphabetical basis. So we've just covered Brighton. We'll do a little bit on Burnley, and then we'll sort of progress, bypass Chelsea with it being the EFL Cup, or certainly just touch upon that, and then go into Palace.
Yeah, on to the Eagles very, very soon there. But yeah, let's start with the Clarets. And it's not been a good week for them, has it, Ben?
It certainly hasn't been a good week for Aaron Ramsey. Unfortunately, it didn't look great last weekend. That knee problem that forced him off. Vincent Kompany had concerns post-match that it was quite a serious setback, and subsequent evaluations and assessments have indeed confirmed that it is season-ending. We're hopeful of a return this year. Wouldn't go into the specifics, but looking at that mechanism from video footage and the sort of timelines involved, it's ACL involvement and then potentially something else in and around that, in which case we're maybe looking at a 9, 10, maybe even 11 months on the sideline. So, we wish Aaron Ramsey well, and he will more than likely be scheduled for surgery at some point. And like I say, once that happens, he can be on the road to recovery.
And there's negative news about Lyle Foster as well. What the kind of latest reports on that was a race against time to even be back this season now.
Yeah, again, Vincent Company, cards close very, to his chest. Wouldn't even go into the specifics of the problem in terms of what that surgical procedure, what that operation was. We're hopeful again that it's not season ending, but it remains to be seen. With any long-term serious injury, there are no guarantees with that. Those road to full recovery are rarely straight. They're often setbacks along the way. So all we can do is hope, and certainly Lyle Foster, hopefully that when he plays again for Burnley, that they are in the Premier League.
Yes, in terms of the injuries, I hope both of the players get back to fitness soon, because pretty awful ones for them. But also, as you say there, they're teetering on the edge of relegation. 7 points clear, 7 points behind at the bottom at the moment without a win in 2024. It's looking pretty dire for the Clarets. So we are on to Crystal Palace now. You can go and find that Crystal Palace based question, Ben, and just talk us through anything to do with the Eagles that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, so we heard from the new boss, the Oliver Glasner, in charge now at Selhurst Park, following Roy Hodgson's decision to step down. Of course, he had that medical episode on the training pitches ahead of game week 25. Thankfully, he has been released and he is in a stable condition, so there are no issues there. With regards to team news, it was hoped that maybe Eberechi Eze would be pushing to be included. He has actually been back on the training pitches and he's had a couple of days with the squad, but this game comes a little bit too soon. So the idea is to get him in for a full week with the main boys. If he comes through that without any problems, then he will be in game week 27. In relation to the question from Highland Huntley, so too, Michael Elise, an initial timeline on Michael Elise, we were looking at in the region of around 2 to 3 months. Nothing official coming out of the club with regards to that. So, but just based on what we know and what we've heard, I'd be very surprised if we see Elise before April. So certainly for the time being, he's out of the equation. Mark Guy, that was thought to be, it was a hyperextension of the knee. It was thought to be a fairly minor concern. But it doesn't sound as if he's very close at this moment. And game week 27, I think it's a trip to Tottenham. We're probably looking at Eze and Will Hughes, and Guy will be beyond that. So fingers crossed it's before maybe the international break, but certainly it doesn't look as if he's going to make either game week 26 or 27.
Now, an interesting point to kind of, so for people that are on Instagram, Ben on FF Hub has his predicted teams up there and we can actually visually see them. So if you want to check them out, head over to FF Hub and you can check it out there. But you've already started with the kind of Glasner, 3-3-4-3, or some people call it a 3-4-2-1. Where do you see the personnel, optimal team here? Because obviously Decore's out, Hughes is out, Elise's out, Eberechi out. This isn't the best possible Crystal Palace team that Glasner has got his hands on at the moment. So who's going to be playing where?
Yeah, it's difficult because a new manager, new philosophies, new methodologies. It's a clean slate. So it's about players proving themselves on the training pitches and making that impression. You would think and assume that Eze would come straight into that team. Henri Ayew was a firm favourite of Roy Hodgson, but will he make the same kind of impression, on the new manager? If I was looking at that current lineup, maybe Edward looks to be the odd one out in terms of his position on that left-hand side. It certainly doesn't look a natural role for him. So I would expect typically Odsonne Edouard to maybe vie with Mateta as that pivot, to lead that Palace front line, with maybe the likes of Eze and Elise once fully fit sitting in behind there. With regards to Guy, then if it was under Hodgson, you would say Chris Richards is the player that would miss out. But again, these players it's a fresh start. So it's about how these players perform, how the team performs. I didn't think Palace were too bad at Goodison Park on Monday night. So they were obviously playing in front of the new manager. And yeah, they've got the jersey. So, it's up to them to retain that. And it's up to those who are on the fringes of that starting 11 in and around the squad to try and, do what they can to take that off them.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how the tactics develop over the coming weeks. I think you wrote a little bit about that for, is it 888? And so people can kind of check out your articles, FF Hub, wherever they want to kind of, get in touch with your output there. But it's interesting to see what the tactics will be over the coming weeks, and also how pragmatic the manager is, because he has like a really clear identity of how he wants to play, but he's also fighting relegation, and so that does make things much, much harder. Everton are up next, and a few weeks ago, maybe in 2023, we were talking about how brilliant the side were playing, that Dyche had turned things around, but now they're looking in a shaky position. They've been a long time without a win. What is the latest in the team news there? Is there positivity there?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the return of Doucouré on Monday night, which is a huge positive for the Toffees. His minutes are still being managed. He's coming off the back of that hamstring problem, so you need to be very careful with regards to that. Also, Onana, we've seen him on the bench for the last two, and then comes off and he grabs that equaliser in that 1-1 draw. So those two are certainly pushing to be involved again. Who drops out remains to be seen. It was a little bit of a surprise to myself that Harrison was the one who moved to the bench on Monday night. The other big discussion point this weekend will be around about maybe the fullback situation. Now, I have went for Vitaly Mykolenko at left back still, although there are slight concerns over his fitness. However, Sean Dyche did say that he was expecting the Ukrainian to recover, and given his form, I would expect to start. On the opposite flank, on the right-hand side, there are several sort of viable options with regards to that. We have seen Ben Godfrey starting there in recent games with Ashley Young pushing a little bit higher up, but I think with the return of maybe Doucouré and Onana, that could see Ashley Young drop into that right back spot. I don't see Nathan Patterson really pushing. I think it's between Godfrey and Young. Seamus Coleman shouldn't be too far away. He missed out on Monday night. That was due to a virus or illness. He had returned to the training pitches on Thursday, although by Sean Dyche's admission, the Irishman wasn't 100%, still felt a little bit groggy, as he put it.
So continuing over to Fulham, and Broja still seems to be missing. He's not in your starting 11. So why is the kind of, I guess, marquee signing of January not playing?
Yeah, I mean, by design or by default, Marco Silva obviously brought in Armando Broja, and then all of a sudden Muniz has, hit the ground running, and he scored 3 goals in 2 games, and probably arguably his 2 best performances in a Fulham shirt. So he has to retain his place. I think that goes without question. Also, the fact that Broja's coming into a new setup and he needs to learn, the combinations around the team and the setups and, his teammates. And he missed out last weekend through a little bit of illness. So maybe that little bit of sharpness is still needed. Of course, he's still recovering post ACL injury. So that's why we have Muniz. The other big discussion point is around the absence of João Palhinha. That he picked up his 10th caution of the campaign last time out. So that's a 2-game ban. Now, that opened up the possibility of who we put in there. Sasa Lukic and Harrison Reed were the 2 players that Marco Silva actually referenced at his pre-match press conference. Although originally I had put Alex Iwobi in there as well as another option. However, the fact that we have doubts over Willian and that muscle problem means that it looks to be you can flip the Cordova Reed onto the left-hand side from the right, pop Iwobi in there, and I've went with Lukic to sit alongside Tom Kearney.
And I think, people probably underestimate how important the absence of Palhinha is, because Fulham already aren't the best defence. They concede, a lot of chances, a lot of high-quality chances. But looking at his defensive data, he's up there as the most tackles, one of the most highest for tackling dribblers, and it just his importance for the way that the team plays is going to be dearly missed at a time where they really need to pick up points. So we'll just kind of see how the team copes without him. But we've got two teams to skip now. No Liverpool, no Luton, because they're not playing this game week. So we're on to the current champions, Manchester City. Now, I think a lot of people will be very, very interested. Kevin De Bruyne, he's in your starting 11. So are those worries overblown? Is there no worry over Kevin De Bruyne?
You may need to refresh that team news, Mr. McKenna, because they actually did remove De Bruyne. It's one that I certainly give consideration to, and Pep Guardiola has been keen to stress that De Bruyne is not injured. He wasn't risked against Brentford from the bench. That was more of a sensation or a feeling, a little bit discomfort in a hamstring. And he said that, there was no need to take any chances with him. And while he will travel with the squad and he will be involved, I just think, there's an argument there to be had about, well, why risk him again? Wait until, he is completely comfortable when you have, other than the likes of Guardiola and also Jack Grealish, those are the only two confirmed absentees. So there's still plenty at his disposal, which is why I've actually went with Mateo Kovacic in terms of that starting. Now, if you're watching YouTube and you've accessed the Hub article,
it has updated. I just re-updated it now. Sometimes it takes time for Hub to update and things like that.
It does, but it's the formation wise, I may not have this formation nailed down. This formation, this 3-2-4-1, what we have seen previously under Pep, maybe suits that Kevin De Bruyne role a little bit better. And whether Kovacic can play that slightly advanced position remains to be seen. But I don't, in terms of personnel, I don't think I'll be too far wrong with this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting game week for them because it seems like injuries have just crept up on them a little bit. And this brings me on to the next question from Marcus. Why is Nathan Ake not starting?
Yeah, it's just a case of, he's got so many players at his disposal in terms of, it's just about managing the group. It's not just about managing those in that starting 11. It's about looking at those players on the fringes of the team, keeping them minutes, keeping them fresh, keeping them sharp. So it's just a bit of a balancing act. And as we always know with the Pep Guardiola Manchester City team, and even more so now that we've got almost a full complement of players, there are going to be surprises. There are going to be changes and there are going to be disappointments. So yeah, Nathan Ake is just one of those players who I feel could potentially miss out this weekend. But, because Akanji is, you would see maybe Ake is the one that maybe is on that left-hand side. Akanji is a player who, again, has been referenced by Pep. I think it was midweek to say that he still hasn't quite found his rhythm. He's still working his way back to full fitness. So, like, opportunities to get minutes under his belt to try and get back into his stride, those pre-injury levels. I think this is a good opportunity for him, which unfortunately means, Nathan Ake could be the one to miss out.
Now we move to the other side of Manchester, the red side, and a lot of injury news about the team here. There's going to be a few big names missing this weekend. But Ben, can you talk us through who they are and why?
Yeah, so the surprise news coming out of the United camp was the loss of Rasmus Højlund. We're looking at roughly an injury that's probably going to be around about 2 to 3 weeks. So that'll keep him out of the Manchester derby. So that's the big news. Who leads that line? Then, we're probably maybe looking at Marcus Rashford in the absence of Anthony Martial. There was also a big update on Luke Shaw. Midweek, we've seen him limp off last weekend, and that is a recurrence of this hamstring problem that has been happening from a while. A lot of questions being asked with regards to the management of Luke Shaw and his involvement. Comes back off that hamstring problem, spent a month out and starts the next 4 games. Was a doubt going in to last Sunday. Starts, plays 44 minutes, and then he's back on the sidelines, and now potentially his involvement at Euro 2024 is at risk. So we're looking at a fairly substantial and lengthy spell on the sidelines, maybe in the region of up to sort of 3 months. That means that we're likely to see Victor Lindelof as a player who's got the nod on that left-hand side in recent games, but Sofyan Amrabat is another option. He has filled in there previously.
So we do have two questions here from Instagram. I'll get to FPL Copycat in a second, but Giallarossi, I hope I've got that correct. He said, who's more likely to start this weekend between Stupinian and Taylor? I'm guessing that's Burnley's Taylor.
I mean, it's a good question. I'm hopeful. The fact that the Estupinian starting or not may come down to the fitness of Karim Benzema. And if you're reading, in between the lines, De Zerbi didn't seem too confident that Mitoma would recover. So that's why I had Purvis in. Charlie Taylor still working his way back up to full fitness. We haven't, you tend not to see too many changes from Vincent Kompany. So that's one, again, it's one to watch. The question is, do you want a Charlie Taylor and a Burnley defender in your team going to Selhurst Park who will be hoping that the new manager can provide a little bit of bounce?
Yeah.
And also this new maybe front foot football, playing with a more attacking philosophy. I can see maybe Palace getting a couple of goals there. So personally, I would take the risk with Purvis, and I would bypass Charlie Taylor. I think Burnley are, along with Sheffield United, are gone now. They're cut adrift, and it's damage limitation time.
Sad. With Estupinian though, it's I guess a good talking point. If Mitoma's out, do you see him playing a much more attacking role? Do you think that maybe that allows him, or De Zerbi will be expecting him to play a more creative attacking role, especially with the fact that so many others in the attacking force of Brighton being out?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the balance of that Seagulls starting lineup, and if Mitoma was to miss out, and we know that João Pedro is also out, and we can never second guess because the Seagulls are one of the most changed teams week to week in the league. But I think Espinen is probably one of the only players capable of playing a more attacking role, naturally suited to that left-hand side. So for that reason, I think he will. And that's why I've maybe went with that sort of 4-4-1-1 or some kind of variation on that, which sort of gives Estupinian that freedom to go forward with Igo Julio maybe sitting in behind in that three.
Yes. And then FPL Copycat said people should understand you're making a guess of these lineups. Of course, we're not privy to any sort of early team news. We don't like that sort of thing as well, because obviously there's a lot of nefarious actors who might just be kind of putting team news out there for their own ends as well. But this is based on, years and years and years of expertise from Ben here. You get the guesses right 99% of the time. So it's based on a lot of good work there. And Gilarossi has said, thank you for answering. Thank you for joining in today. Absolutely lovely to see you, Rossi, there. Now, as you said at the start, it is the Arsenal-Newcastle game, the Dinnery McKenna derby. What is the latest for the Magpies? Are they going to be able to field a fairly strong team?
Yes, potentially. I've copped out a little bit here. I would love to see Eddie Howe bring Tino Livramento in, go with a 3 or a 5 with Tino and Trippier, the highest, pushing up wing back roles. If he's not going to drop down Burn, then I think sitting in alongside Botman and Shaw would be a thing to do. Will he do that? It means a move away from that tried and trusted 4-3-3. I just don't know. I thought he would have done it last week against Bournemouth. If he wasn't prepared to do it at home against Bournemouth, then I question whether we do it down at the Emirates against Arsenal. Maybe there's more of an argument to be had or a discussion around having a back five against Arsenal because of the goal scoring form that they've been in. For the purposes of this, I've went with that 4-3-3, and I've brought Jacob Murphy back in for Harvey Barnes, who we seen start last weekend. He's still working his way back to full fitness. And it was probably a little bit too soon for him. Jacob Murphy was coming off the back of his own calf problem and only got minutes on the training pitches on the eve of that Bournemouth match. So that's why he sort of went with Barnes over Murphy. I see those roles reversed. But like I say, I would love to see a 3-5-2 or a 5-3-2 at the Emirates, but I just don't know.
And I guess, how close, I'm sure you'll say they're very, very close, are Joe Willock and Isaac to this team. You've kind of mentioned there in the article that it's a game day decision. But do you not think that Eddie Howe will roll the dice because it's such an important game? Or is it the other way around, that obviously this is one of the most difficult games this season, but, it's game week 26, there's 12 more games to go. There's more important games ahead.
Yes, all of the above. Joe Willock would be the big surprise starter, say if he was to come in. Spent a significant spell out with hamstring and Achilles problems. I can see him making the bench against his former employers, and maybe getting some minutes. Alexander Isak is the player that you would look at that team and you would think, he's a player that I'm prepared to risk. However, we're talking another 3+ weeks on the sidelines. This is his 4th time loss groin injury of the season. There's some suggestion that he may need to go under the knife over the summer to remedy that problem. So it's a case of managing that issue. Isak didn't look 100% when he has played. To me, he looks like he is carrying that problem. He has been fantastic, but I would see his impact being more beneficial from the bench, and maybe having Anthony Gordon and leading that attack and trying to cause the likes of Saliba and Gabriel some problems with his pace down the middle.
So continuing on from Newcastle, we have Nottingham Forest, and one of the worries for this game week was Iwunyi. Taiwo
Awomni, yeah.
Yep, got there in the end after I was sneezing. That was the problem. What is the latest news from Forest?
Yeah, there were concerns when he came off last weekend. Was it West Ham? And there was some suggestion that he may have picked up a knock. Of course, he was coming off the back of that groin problem, had surgery to remedy that. Those were dealt with, in the immediate aftermath post-match. He's fine. Minutes are being managed. The reality of the situation is Awomni probably wouldn't have had as many starts or as minutes as he's had in recent times, had the likes of Chris Wood been fully fit. Chris Wood hamstring problem in the region of maybe 6 to possibly 8 weeks on the sidelines. So Nuno needs to ensure that they keep their striker fit, and it's a fine balance between managing those minutes, getting that game time, and making sure they don't push him too hard for him to suffer a setback.
Mohammed is laughing for some reason. I don't know why. So we're going to move to Sheffield United. As you've kind of said a little bit earlier in the video, that they're gone, that they're down, most likely. But there is, I guess, some hope. There always is, because until the fat lady sings, it's not over. So what is the news for game week 26 with the Blades?
So no official news from Chris Wilder. He literally come out and said, why would I want to give you any team news when the games are hard enough as it comes, and why would we want to tell the rest of the world? So we've been left to read between the lines with regards to this. So I have Ivo Grubic return in goal, missed a couple of matches due to the concussion protocols, and Wilder stuck with Wes Fotheringham for last time out after the 3-1 win at Kenilworth Road. After this 5-0 defeat, I see Grubic coming back in. Also, Cameron Archer Um, Pulled up on training last Friday with a slight cough issue. That was assessed on the Saturday. That kept him out, but like I say, it was just a bit of a minor issue. So I have Archer back starting, and also Ollie McBurney. He returned to the matchday squad last time out. He was an unused substitute, but by Chris Weiler's own admission, he had only had about 10 or 15 minutes on the training pitches, and he said if things had been going quite well, he would have thrown him in there, give him a little bit of taste of action, but because they were 5-0 down, there was no real point in taking any risks. So a full week from McBurney, and that's why we have him back in that start 11.
Again, no Spurs news this game week, so we're going to move on to the Hammers. And it's quite an important game for them this weekend, but it seems like the injury room has cleared up for them. But I guess all season they've been pretty good with the injuries, haven't they, Ben? So the only one is Lucas Paqueta, is that correct?
Yeah, so Paqueta is back on the training pitches. He did start working outside ahead of game week 25, but wasn't risked by David Moyes. We did see Mikel Antonio return to that Hammers lineup last time out, which was a little bit of a surprise. I think we're well over 2 months out with that MCL knee problem. So for him to be thrown back in there, like I say, it did come as a little bit of a surprise, but maybe that was because, we've seen the likes of Ben Rama and Pablo Fornals depart, and maybe those attacking options aren't as plentiful as they once were. If you're watching on YouTube and on the hub, the Jared Bowen and the Mikel Antonio positions need to be swapped around. That's one of Mikel Antonio would be leading the line as a striker with Jared Bowen coming off the right hand side. Paquetá, I think, is probably just a little bit short in terms of his match fitness, which is why I'm not starting him. But of course, the Hammers do have 2 extra days ahead of the game because they don't play until Monday night.
Do you think he could get minutes off the bench for this week and then maybe start making his way into the first 11 the week after and the week after that?
Absolutely. There will be some kind of involvement from Paquetá. To what extent, I'm not sure. Given recent results and pressure and discontent in the West Ham from the West Ham supporters, it wouldn't come as a huge surprise if Paquetá was to start. But I think ideal situation, it would be minutes from the bench.
So just one little kind of statistic there that I found absolutely interesting with this tie is that West Ham have not won against Brentford since Brentford were promoted into the Premier League in 2021. So five games without a result for the Hammers there, really. But the last team of this week, and everybody as well, because we're on the last team, get in your final questions before we head off. Wolves. I guess the negative news is Cunha is out for a while, but any other news for the team?
Yeah, Gary O'Neill's been a little bit reluctant to put any kind of time frame on the return of Matthias Cunha, but again, we heard from the new Brazil coach and who ruled him out of the upcoming internationals in March. So that probably means we're looking at around about maybe a 6 to potentially 8 week timeline for that hamstring injury. Hee-chan Wan is a player who has returned to the team following his involvement at the Asian Cup. Elsewhere, we were wondering, could Wolves bounce back from that home defeat at Molineux to Brentford? They did. They went to Tottenham. They got the 3 points. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if Wolves were unchanged.
Yes, and they're one of the good-looking sides at the moment. They've been in fabulous form. I think only 2 losses in their last 11 games. I mean, pretty sensational stuff for the team that, one of the favourites for the drop at the start of the season. A lot of people said, Gary O'Neill, why have they brought him in? But I've liked that he's proven a lot of people wrong and maybe proven why Bournemouth should have carried on with him. I think he's a great manager. But anyway, as always, it's been great to chat to you, Ben. It's been great to talk to everybody here on Instagram and also on YouTube as well. If you have not had your questions answered this week, you can always tweet me or Ben. You can get involved with the comments below and we'll keep an eye on it going into game week 26. But we wish you the best of luck and also the best of health on and off the field. And we will see you again next week.